In 1499, an old man in Poland sat down to write a book. It would travel across Europe for 200 years. Kings and generals would read it to learn how to fight the Turks. They did not know the man who wrote it had been one of them. His name was Konstantin Mihailović. He was Serbian. He had been a Janissary. He had fought for Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, and he had written it down. To understand the book, you have to go back 44 years, to a mountain town in Kosovo. June 1st, 1455. Novo Brdo was a silver mining city. Its walls had held for 6 weeks against Ottoman cannon. Then the gates opened. Inside the walls, Konstantin was about 20 years old. Years later, Konstantin would write what he saw that morning. The Sultan stood at the small gate of the castle. He sorted the boys from the girls. He sorted the women on one side of a ditch and the men on the other. He ordered all the men of importance to be beheaded. 700 girls were given to his soldiers. 320 boys were kept for the Sultan. Konstantin was one of them. So were his 2 brothers. They were marched south, toward Anatolia. One night, near a village called Samokovo, 19 boys slipped away into the dark. Konstantin was one of them. They were caught before dawn. "We were bound," he wrote later. "We were beaten." And then the march continued. In Anatolia, they were circumcised, converted to Islam, given new names. They learned Turkish. They learned the Quran. They learned to march, to shoot, to pray toward Mecca. And they learned something stranger. In the Janissary Corps, a wooden spoon was tucked into every soldier's cap. It was called the Kasyklik, the Brotherhood of the Spoon. Every regiment had a great copper cauldron, bigger than a man could lift alone. They called it the Kazan. It was more than a cooking pot. It was carried into battle like a flag. If a regiment lost a Kazan, they were forbidden from marching in parades for a year. And if they turned the Kazan upside down in the yard, empty, it meant revolution. It meant they no longer ate the Sultan's food. For 8 years, Konstantin marched with them. Belgrade in 1456. Trebizond in 1461. Bosnia, Wallachia, Greece. He stood at Constantinople while the empire of the Romans fell. He rose through the ranks. By 1463, the Sultan trusted him enough to leave him in command of a fortress with 48 Janissaries under him. Somewhere in those 8 years, he crossed the Danube into Wallachia to fight a prince the Ottomans called Kazikli Voivoda. 400 years later, a novelist would borrow his name for a book. He would call him Dracula. Konstantin wrote what he saw. Vlad cut off the noses of Ottoman soldiers and sent them to Hungary as proof of how many Turks he had killed. In one crossing of the Danube, Konstantin says, 250 Janissaries died. 250 of his brothers, men who ate from the same cauldron, men who carried the same spoon. 1463, Bosnia. Konstantin was in the fortress of Zvekij with 48 men. The Hungarian king Matthias Corvinus came with an army. The siege was short. The fortress fell. Konstantin was taken prisoner. And then the Hungarians discovered something. The Janissary officer they had captured was not a Turk. He was a Serb. They asked him a question. Were you one of us, or were you one of them? He had worn a Janissary cap for 8 years. He had prayed in Arabic. He had marched under the crescent. But his name was still Konstantin. He answered, and they let him go. He went to Poland. He lived there for 30 years. He did not marry anyone. He left only a book. He wrote it between 1497 and 1501. He wrote it in Czech. Or Polish. Scholars still are not sure. He never wrote it in Turkish, but he did not write it in Serbian either. For 2 centuries, the book circulated throughout Europe. Christians and Ottomans read it, but never with certainty.